Welcome back to the City Current Radio Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Park. We're honored to be joined by our next guest. We get to talk about financial health and wellness and making sure that we are good stewards of our resources. Here with us, we have Karen Fort. She's the Master Financial Coach. How are you doing, Karen?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you, Jeremy.
So the fun on your end is we get to dive into this world of financial fitness and making sure that, like I said, we're good stewards of our resources. But dive into a little bit of your world in terms of what you do. So let's start there. Give us some scope.
Okay, well, absolutely. Well, I'm a master financial coach, and what I do is I meet with individuals or I will speak at financial freedom seminars. And one of the key elements I talk about is budgeting, because that's a number one way of taking control of your finances is learning how to budget. And contrary to popular belief, it is not a four-letter word. So first and foremost, we need to learn how to budget. And then, so many people have debt, whether it's student loan debt, house, car, whatever it is, or credit cards. And I teach them how to demolish that debt in record time. So it's not taking years and years to get rid of that debt. And then I also teach people how to build wealth, whether you're going to get ready for retirement with a 401k, Roth IRA, or a traditional IRA. But I also teach about strategies on the stock market, which is quite fun. And then also I'm an avid real estate investor. I buy and sell, I flip, all of the whole nine yards there. So whatever, floats somebody's boat in the area of finances, I can help them do that.
When you're sitting down with somebody for the first time, what are the questions that you like to ask, or what sort of questionnaire, what sort of information are you trying to gather on your end?
Well, absolutely. And that is a great question that you just asked, because my coaching is not cookie cutter. It's individual. So one thing I want to find out first and foremost is what are their dreams, aspirations, and vision for the future, whether it's 20 years from now, 10 years, 5 years, because if they can identify and speak to me what they're wanting to see, it's kind of like a roadmap. You use GPS to get to your destination. Well, if your destination is to build wealth and get out of debt, now I know where we want to end up. And then I want to find out, how quickly do you want to get there? Because if you're going to go to Walt Disney World, you could take 30 days to get there, or you can get there in a couple of hours, depending on what mode of transportation you want to utilize. And that's another thing that I want to ask, because some people will need to make some adjustments. I don't like to use the word change because people don't like to change, but they don't mind to adjust. So they may want to adjust some areas in their financial arena to make that destination happen. So I want to find out their visions and aspirations first and foremost. And then I want to find out how quickly they want to get there. Then the third question is, now I'm going to ask a series of questions so I can have a snapshot into your financial picture. What debts do you have? What's the balances and what are those payments? And find out what their income is. Because if we make, let's just throw out a number here, if you make $5,000 a month and you're spending $5,000 a month on everyday living expenses, we may need to adjust something here and there because it shouldn't cost that much. Or maybe you bought a vehicle that you shouldn't have bought. I've coached some people where their car payment or vehicle payment is 3 times what their house payment is.
Wow.
And I'm just thinking, wow, we need to make some adjustments here. Maybe you shouldn't have bought that $180,000 vehicle. And so that's what I ask.
Which, to me on my end, obviously your home is a major investment. Your vehicles, like you're talking about, where do you start looking at the areas to make those adjustments? In other words, start talking about that, what can be sometimes that 4-letter word, but talk about budgeting and making adjustments. Where do you start to kind of navigate so that people can pay off things sooner and walk them through that?
Sure. Well, after I find out what their debts are and their income, typically your housing should only be 25 to 32%, of your take-home pay. So if you have a house payment that's taken 40, 45, 50% of your income, if you're renting, you need to figure out where you can move. And if you bought a house where that mortgage is that high, we may want to look at refinancing to get that payment down. Or maybe you need to sell and streamline and get a smaller place. Most of the time, it's not the house that get people in trouble. Most of the time, it's a vehicle payment that they bought too much. They just paid too much for it. Or credit cards. Oh, people have such an issue with credit cards. And so when I see credit cards, I really take a look at that. And then I try to find out, because some people are emotional spenders. Maybe they've had a bad work week, they're anxious or they're depressed and they just need a pick me up, but they don't really have the money in the bank and they opt to use that credit card. I've seen more people in trouble with credit cards than anything else, to be quite honest with you, even more than a vehicle or a house. And so that's really unfortunate, but it's something that can change. That's easy to change rather than having to, downsize your house.
Yeah, and that's actually what I was going to say is talk to us about some of your recommendations for lowering either the credit card debt or rolling it over with lower interest rates. Like, talk us through some of the recommendations you like to make when it comes to people that have too high of a credit card debt.
Well, if they have credit card debt, I actually coached a couple one time, they had 86 credit cards between them. 86
Wow.
credit cards, and every one of those cards had a balance on it. And that was an eye-opening experience, because they both had credit cards together, but then she had credit cards her husband didn't know about. He had credit cards that his wife didn't know about. So it was a very eye-opening coaching session, to say the least. But we put all cards on the table, no pun intended, and we just moved forward with that. But I want to see, do you have more than one credit card? And are they department store credit cards? Because that's another hook. We'll give you 15% off today if you take a credit card out. When it comes in the mail, you can just cancel it. 91% of the time, people don't cancel it. They slip it away and use it for emergencies. And buying, new clothing is not necessarily an emergency. So we talk about what credit cards they have. What are the interest rates on those cards? I've seen them as high as 33.3%, unfortunately. So we look at, and like I said, this is not cookie cutter, but we look at various ways. You can contact that particular card holder, whether it's a department store or what have you, and ask them. Ask not, get not. The worst thing they're going to say is no. And ask them, look, this is my balance. Would you consider lowering the interest rate for the remainder of this card, as long as I don't charge anymore? Surprisingly, some of them will. Especially the high interest credit cards, you want to look at perhaps scooting that over to a 0% interest rate. And some cards will offer 6% or 6-month, 12-month, 18-month. If you have somewhat of a low balance on a card and you find a card that allows you 18 months, 12 months for 0%. The ultimate goal will be to do that. Now, you will have to pay a small fee called a transfer balance or balance transfer, which is 1, 2, or 3% one-time fee. And the key to that is don't charge on that card, because they will charge you interest on any new charges you have. And the goal will be to pay that balance off within that 12-month or 18-month period of time at 0%, and then get rid of it. Ultimately, I'm okay actually with people having one credit card, whether it's one of the big ones, Visa, MasterCard, what have you.
Sure.
As long as you can have self-control. If you can't pay it off every month, then don't take out the card, because then you're going to find all kinds of reasons why to use that card. That's one way of eliminating that debt. And another way would be if you have little credit cards, but they all have interest on them. And what I say little, meaning small balances, put all of those onto one card and get rid of those other cards and just allow yourself one credit card, because most department stores, gas stations are going to use the big name credit card. and then you don't have to have all of those individual, department store credit cards.
Right. I mean, I've always kind of had the mentality, to your point, of have one or two credit cards for different things, but always pay them off at the end of the month so that you never have a balance or a debt that you owe because of the interest on them. So to me, it's always a strategy of never charge more than you can afford to pay off. Talk about on your end student loans and some of these other things that, to your point, loom over so many, but yet there is a way to strategically start kind of whittling those down and paying those off too.
Absolutely. Well, if you do not have student loan debt and you're getting ready to go back to school, try, if at all possible, don't take out a student loan. You can work part-time while you're going to school. What? Work? I want to study. Well, studies actually show that students that work while they're taking classes actually end up with a higher GPA. And plus, you're learning how to manage your time in a greater way. Now, for those that have student loans, they're almost like a nipping dog at your heels that never goes away. Contact the student loan holders, because my thoughts are ask not, get not. I coached a young lady one time that had over $180,000 in student loan debt because she changed her major 4 times and she just kept taking loans out. And there was no way she was going to get out of that debt. So I just told her, I said, listen, ask not, get not, call them up. Explain your situation. Tell them you want to pay them. Don't try to get out of it because then they're going to get real defensive with you. I want to pay. I took the loan out. You deserve your money. But here's my situation. Can you forgive some of it? Can you write some of it off? Ask not, get not. The worst thing they're going to say is no. You won't know unless you ask. She got a letter in the mail, I kid you not, about 5 or 6 weeks later, and they wrote off over $30,000. Now, I know that might not sound like a big deal when you're considering $180,000 in student loan debt. Hey, but that's a chunk knocked off of that debt. That's one way. Call them up and ask. The second thing is you don't want to make just the minimum payment because it's just going to keep dragging on. So make extra, even if it's an extra $20 here or there, that'll go directly towards that principal rather than the interest. And that's another great way. But first and foremost, if you don't have any student loan debt, try not to take out any student loans and work and do what you got to do to get through the classes and work while you do that. Secondly, if you do, call them up and ask. Call them up and ask. And then thirdly, pay extra. Yes.
So much of this, like you're saying, is being proactive, not getting yourself in the situation to begin with, but being mindful going in of, having a budget, sticking to the budget, where your percentages need to be for your home, your auto, not taking out the student loans and using your credit cards efficiently. And so a lot of it is just strategic money management. Give me maybe 1 or 2 of your other favorite tips, and it can be around budgeting. It can be around, like you said, not just making a minimum payment, but making sure that you're adding on an extra principal payment as well. But what are 1 or 2 of your other just favorite tips?
One of my other favorite tips is if you work for an employer and they have an ACH deposit, meaning you don't get a paycheck, they automatically place it in your account. Listen, out of sight, out of mind. Allow them to take a portion of money, whether it's 5% or 10% or whatever you feel that you can start with, and have them start pulling that out and putting it in a retirement account for you. You won't miss it because it's not going to be there. It'll be an account, and before you know it, that is going to get nice and fat for you. Something else to consider is when you, depending on what bank or banking institution you use, when your paycheck is deposited in your account, you can ask your bank, automatically put this amount in a checking account and put this amount in a savings account or emergency account, whatever you want to deem that. And like I said, out of sight, out of mind, you're not going to miss it. And that's an automatic way of saving, which is one of my favorite tips. And then a budget. I know that almost sounds like a 4-letter word, but it really isn't. It's 6 letters. But a budget is so empowering because a budget puts you in the driver's seat rather than you being in the passenger seat. You're in control of your money when you have a budget rather than being out of control. And I always know if people are budgeting or not, because if they say at the end of the month, what happened to all that money I made? I know that they're not budgeting. Or maybe you had money in your wallet at the beginning of the week, and at the end of the week, you open it and think, what happened to the money that was in my wallet? You're not budgeting. Or when at the end of the year at tax time, you have that W-2. Oh my gosh, look at the income I had. What happened to it? You're not budgeting, because a person who budgets knows exactly where every dollar is going, and you're in control. And so those are my favorite tips that I can speak of.
Great advice. On the real estate side, you being a real estate investor yourself, give us maybe one or two tips for those who say, I want to start getting into this as an investment opportunity. What encouragement or advice would you give them?
Real estate is a great money maker, but learn through podcasts like this and other podcasts. Feed yourself information. Don't go into it blindly, but start learning tips of the trade. Check and see what you can afford. You know, you don't want to buy a house in $100,000 neighborhood and pay $100,000 for the house and dump $50,000 in it and think you're going to sell it for $250,000. Doesn't work that way, because the market is going to look at what do the houses sell for in that neighborhood. Now, if you're in a $100,000 neighborhood and some reason a foreclosure pops up at say $50,000, yeah, I'd say you could consider that and then dump some money in it. But remember, don't get emotionally attached to a house you're going to flip, because you're not going to live in it. Yes, you want to make it nice. Yes, you want to make it clean. And yes, you want to update it. But don't necessarily put in marble countertops when the rest of the neighborhood does not have marble countertops. Look at it like that. And then again, listen to podcasts. Teach yourself. When you go into a house, look at the foundation, number one thing. Look at the roof. Look at your big ticket money items there. Your heating system, your cooling system, the windows. Are you going to have to replace all of those items? Or maybe you're not going to have to replace any of them, and it's just going to be cosmetic, a little bit of lipstick, paint, carpet, maybe having to gut a bathroom or something like that. But know that. And then also, are you going to do all of the work, or are you going to hire someone? Because 9 times out of 10, the materials are going to cost you, which you can go to Lowe's or Home Depot or somewhere and see what those items are. But unless you have a handyman, that contractor is going to be about double of what your materials are going to be. So know what your limitations are, whether you're going to be the one that puts that roof on or guts that kitchen and does that work, and maybe you'll contract some of it out. But know that going in, don't buy the house and then say, well, this is what we're going to do, and now you're in over your head. But yeah, the market is great right now.
Well, and so that's kind of the last question before we wrap up with the contact information is, how do you view, because obviously right now we are on a little bit of a roller coaster ride where there is an economic downturn. People are unfortunately, sadly, losing jobs. You've got the furloughs. You have the stock market, which is obviously kind of up and down, up and down, up and down. How do you view this time that we're in right now from a financial, money management side?
Sure. I'm going to tell you that it's a buyer and a seller market. And I'll tell you why. People like me, we're buying because we know other people are not. So this is a great time for those of us that want to buy. You can buy because you've got a lot of leverage. A lot of people, because of the COVID, they're not buying, they're waiting. But it's also a seller market because there's not a lot of houses on the market. It's very little. So if you want to sell your home and there's only, very few houses out there on the market, you're going to have an upper hand as well. So I know that sounds unusual, but it's actually a buyer and a seller market right now.
Well, and I think like anything, if you know what you're looking for and you know where the opportunities are, it gives you clarity around, okay, let's focus in, and whatever it is, whether it's paying down debt, being laser focused on budget, looking at real estate, investment options. If you know what you're doing and you've got a plan and a strategy, your chance of success is much greater. So Wrap up and
Absolutely.
tell everyone where they can go to reach out, to learn more, but obviously to reach out and seek your guidance.
Certainly. I have my website, KarenFord.org. I've authored 4 books. They're all on the website as well as Amazon. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, KBF Money Managing.
Well, greatly appreciate all you're doing, Karen, on your end. Thank you for coming on the show. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much.